Hey, this is C&D channel. I'm Chris. This is MMA for you. I'm going to be doing my post-fight analysis for UFC on FX2. It was a really good night of fights. Lots of finishes like arm bars, triangle arm bars, TKOs, guillotines. The flyweights really got to show what they got to do, and there's some up-and-comers to look out for as well. Now, like Philippou, Andrew Craig, Waldberger, Pineda. So let's get right to it. Okay, Martin Kampmann beat Thiago Alves by a guillotine choke in the third round. Before I really delve into this, I want to clear something up here. I was accused of being biased against the guys that I didn't pick, and what I'm about to say with Martin Kampmann, it's not going to be the most positive stuff. And it may look like I'm going to be really positive on the guy I did pick, Alves, but it's not because I'm like biased or anything like that. It's because this is how I saw the fight, and this is more of how I felt than anything else. I don't want to get misconstrued anymore as far as like how I analyze fights. Pretty much I call it as I see it, not necessarily because I like one guy over another or I'm disappointed my pick lost. I honestly don't really care if my pick loses so much, and if I pick Martin Kampmann to win this fight, I would have probably criticized Martin Kampmann regardless. So, now that we got that out of the way, I will say with Kampmann, you can never count the guy out. He's definitely a solid fighter and should get a top 10 fight after this. But I was generally not too impressed with his performance except for the front kick in the beginning and the guillotine choke at the end. Otherwise, I liked what I saw from Alves. He did mix in wrestling with his striking. When Kampmann would go forward, Alves would punch him in the face, pretty much. The other thing I really like about Alves is that he, when his back is against the cage, he really fights to get his back off the cage, and I really like that. I wish more fighters would do that instead of get wall installed. As far as next fights go, because Condit is waiting for GSP, I'd like to see Martin Kampmann versus Jake Ellenberger. If that's not possible, maybe a guy like Ebersol, or the winner of Roy McDonald versus Che Mills, or the winner of Koscheck versus Kampmann, or Koscheck versus Hendricks. With Thiago Alves, I'd like to see him fight like the loser of Paul Thiago versus Sayar. If not that, Diego Sanchez is another guy I think would be a really good fight for him. Okay, next fight after that, Joseph Benavidez beat Yasuhiro Urishitani by TKO in the second round. Didn't get to see much from Urishitani here, and honestly, I only know of two other flyweight fights that's going to happen. It's going to be John Dodson versus Darren Uyenoyama, and I think he should probably get the loser of that fight. The only other flyweight fight I can think of is Luis Godinot versus John Lineker. And I think Urishitani should get the loser of Dodson Uyenoyama. Benavidez showed some great power here. His wrestling's always on point. He has that nasty guillotine, and I think he's the favorite to win this whole thing. Okay, next fight after that, Demetrius Johnson and Ian McCall went to majority draw. Originally, this fight went to a split decision for Demetrius Johnson. I liked what I saw from McCall, especially with his wrestling. He definitely had the superior wrestling and top control, especially in the third round, getting back mount, and just pounding on Demetrius Johnson. Stand-up wise, I liked Johnson's stand-up a little better. I thought he held his hand, especially the way he'd hold his hands up. While McCall didn't always have his hands up at a lot of times. I thought Johnson was overall the faster fighter. in this fight, actually, I better get to that. I actually, the fights I did get right were Benavidez, Philippou, Tahuna, Parash, and Sean Jordan. This fight right here got fight of the night, and it was a really good fight. It really got to show what the flyweights can bring to the UFC. Submission of the night actually went to Campman, and knockout of the night went to Benavidez. One thing is, though, even though I picked Johnson to win this, but I actually thought McCall won this fight. I thought he got round 3. Some guys give him a 10-8. And I thought he got round 2 as well, with an argument for him getting round 1 even. It's good to see that it's a draw nonetheless. It's such a good fight. And I hear it's tentatively scheduled, the rematch tentatively scheduled for April. Okay, next fight after that, Konstantinos Philippou beat Court McGee by unanimous decision. Court McGee should probably move down to 170 if possible. He looked particularly small against Philippou, and Philippou, is not going to be the first guy that's going to be like a big middleweight. There's guys like Ronnie Marks, Yushin Okami, Tim Bosch. They're all big middleweights. If McGee wants to keep fighting at middleweight, there's fights like against Chris Camozzi or Kyle Noki, among others. With Philippou, I think a fight with Ronnie Marks would be pretty cool, or even Tim Bosch. If you want to kind of get him up there, the winner of Belcher versus Palhares would be good as well. Philippou, I liked his jab. He does kind of loof his punches, though, when he doesn't go for straight punches. And his takedown defense was on point as well. He seems to have a strong chin on him, too. And I liked his side-to-side movement. With McGee, he's very mid-tier. He's a bit stiff with his striking, but he does outwork his opponents. I think he should cut to 170. Okay, on to the prelims. James Tahuna beat Aaron Rosa by TKO in the first round. Tahuna hits hard, man. In his last fight, he beat up Ricardo Romero. He was giving Alexander Gustafsson some trouble before he got taken down and choked out. He's knocked out guys like Anthony Parash as well. I'd like to see him get a Fabio Maldonado if possible. If not, maybe it's Stephan Bonner. That'd be pretty cool. Or Thiago Silva if he beats Igor Prokrayak, as I believe Tahuna beat Prokrayak. I think Aaron Rosa is just a lower tier light heavyweight, and I think he should probably just fight like Nick Penner next, pretty much. Next fight after that, Anthony Parash beat Nick Penner by TKO in the first round. Parash, really interesting guy because he is largely one-dimensional. He's been getting a good win streak with this one dimension, though. It's just very interesting. He's a jiu-jitsu guy. He passes guard really well, and he gets mount and holds mount and finishes from mount very well. And that he did that here. I'd like to see Parash versus Stephan Bonner next. I think that'd be a good fight. If not, maybe even though he's coming off a loss, Vladimir Matyushenko be another good fight for Parash. It's interesting because he's in his late 30s, but he's doing very well for himself. Next fight after that, Steven Seiler beat Cole Miller by unanimous decision. This was supposed to be some form of revenge fight for Cole Miller, and it didn't pan out that way. It's Cole Miller's first fight at 145. He got outstruck, out-clinched, and he managed to rally in the third round, but that's it. As far as who he can get next, he can have a rematch with Leonard Garcia. Nam fans out there. Manny Gambarian, I think, still in the UFC. Same with Tyson Griffin, so there's some good fights for him there. But Steven Seiler, he's doing very well for himself. Maybe a fight with Daniel Pineda next would be pretty cool. Jim Hades would be interesting as well. Or maybe it's, someone more just mid-tier, like a Cub Swanson or Ricardo Lamas. Next fight after that, Andrew Craig beat Kyle Noki by unanimous decision. Kyle Noki, it was reported that he blew out his knee, but nonetheless, I liked what I saw from Andrew Craig, especially with his composure. For a guy during the time he only had 6 MMA fights, been training for 2 years, first fight in the UFC. Great composure, great ground and pound too. I don't, he's coming off his first win in the UFC, so I don't really think he should fight like a Philippou yet. But I think maybe the winner of Mayhem versus CB Dalloway, that'd be a good fight. Or maybe Ricky Fukuda, who got his first win in the UFC, even though he should have got that win over Nick Ring. With Noki, there's a lot of lower tier guys he can fight. I always like maybe a fight with Jason McDonald would be cool, but I think Court McGee would be another good fight for him as well. And of course, the loser of Dalloway versus Mayhem works too. Okay, next fight after that, TJ Wahlberger beat Jake Heck by submission by armbar in the first round. I like what I see from TJ Wahlberger. This guy's jiu-jitsu is really good, and he's really young. He's only like 23. I remember in his last fight, he was on his back, got an armbar, was working an armbar, and all of a sudden going to a triangle choke. I mean, the guy's transitions ability is amazing. Jake Heck is no joke. He's a good prospect himself. I want to see Wahlberger fight the winner of like Matt Brown versus Stephen Thompson. Other fights, the winner of Sayar versus Paul Tiago. Maybe give him a guy like a Mike Pyle. Some good fights for Wahlberger. With Heck, the loser of those fights that I mentioned probably. Another guy I was impressed with is Daniel Pineda as he beat Mackin Semmerzer by triangle armbar in first round. Good stuff from Pineda. He's taken his last fight and this fight on short notice and won by submission. He's a guy I'm looking out for. I'd like to see him fight Jim Hates next. I think the grappling battle there would be really interesting. If not, like I said, there's guys like Cub Swanson, Ricardo Lamas. So there's a lot of good fights for him. With Semmerzer, he should probably be cut. He just can't seem to win very much in the UFC. And I think fighting in the regional scene will probably help him a lot. But Pineda is a featherweight that I am going to look out for moving forward. And finally, Sean Jordan beat Ole Thompson by TKO in the second round. Ole Thompson's a really tough guy. I think he should fight a guy like a Dave Herman or Christian Moorcraft next. With Sean Jordan, this guy's going to be a tough fight for a lot of heavyweights. He's very agile for his size. He's short, stocky, very athletic. He can do flips. But he hits really hard as well, and he's constantly improving. Before this, he beat LeVar Johnson by a key lock in Strikeforce. He trains at Jackson's, and I'm just impressed with what I see from this guy. I think he should maybe get Pat Barry next if he wins against LeVar Johnson, or maybe Matt Mitrione, even though he's coming off a loss. Wouldn't even mind seeing Jordan versus Mike Russo or Stefan Struve. So that's pretty much it for my post-fight analysis for UFC on FX2. If you have any comments, just leave them below. That's it for MMA for you. Thank you guys very much.